Welcome to Arthurian April, day 17. And today we are going to talk about Arthur's disappearing sister, Anna. Yesterday I went into detail about Morgan Le Fay and a little bit about Morgause. I didn't mention Elaine, but I did mention Anna a little bit. As I said, the Sisters of Arthur, it's a confusing subject. What struck me about 20 years ago, reading Geoffrey of Monmouth's Histories of the Kings of Britain for the first time, was that after all the business with Gorlois and Uther and Igraine, they make mention that not only was Arthur conceived, but that they also had a daughter named Anna. She would have been a little bit younger than him, but they would both be full-blooded brother and sister, unlike the Cornwall girls, the daughters of Gorlois, Morgause, Morgan, and Elaine. Elaines are another subject and their own brand of humor and amusement in Arthuriana, but that's not for today. I had never heard this name Anna before, and something about the alliteration, something about the fact that it seems such a relatively plain name in comparison to so many other things had me wondering, where did she go? I had read a lot of Arthurian stuff by that point, and I'd never read about Anna. And we're not talking about one of the later romances, we're talking about the kind of inception point of the main story of King Arthur. So Anna is also the Queen of Orkney, and in some of the romances she's only referred to as the Queen of Orkney. Sometimes later on the Queen of Orkney becomes Morgause, and Anna just gets faded out of the narrative pretty much entirely. She has a couple of other names. If you read any of Tennyson, she's referred to by a different name, and it kind of goes back and forth. But Monmouth's work was very popular. Like, we have over 200 extant versions of History of the Kings of Britain, which for that time period and given its staying power is really surprising. So other than being Gawain's mom, there really wasn't much about Anna at all. Sometimes she's also Mordred's mother, other times she's Agravain's mother, but then eventually the Queen of Orkney becomes definitely the mother of Gawain, Gaheris, and Gareth. And that, my friends, is why I began my Queens of Fate series. I figured if you were raised alongside the once and future king, the boy who would be king, the golden Arthur, you might have a fascinating story. But what if I wrote the story from her perspective and it didn't really change the story as we know it, it just gives us an idea of the narrative happening behind the scenes. I really like this idea that she actually did disappear, that there is a reason that she's not remembered. And so even in early drafts, Anna has this prophecy that Merlin reads to her that says, "Through all the ages and in the hearts of men, you will be forgotten." Politically, this is a very important thing for Merlin to do because technically she has just as much claim to the throne from a blood perspective as her brother, and certainly more than their half-sisters. They are much more interested in her progeny because you gotta have more than an heir, right? You want an heir and some spares. To my knowledge, there are not other major stories about Anna in particular. And I hope that through my retelling, people find some comfort in the story of a woman who is seeking vengeance on her own terms with her own skills and learning who she is. I also really wanted an opportunity to reclaim the mother figure in Arthuriana because so often in these stories and in fantasy in general, mothers are relegated to the sidelines. They are, as mentioned earlier, literally just the gateway for heirs to happen and not actually have any agency themselves. My world of Arthur is by no means super progressive. Women are still absolutely, not having an easy time. However, I did want to construct this world very much reminiscent of the 9 women that we talked about yesterday in Morgan Le Fay's story, that there could be women together, banding together in order to change fate, in order to change the history of the world. But it's no easy task. Anna has to deal with all of the kinds of stuff that you have to deal with when you have children in the first place, and she has 3. And they don't get along, and Gawain is a big hothead, and he's trying to get married underneath her nose without her knowing, and coming back to court after 20 years away has so much changing that she's completely out of the loop. I essentially wanted to create Anna as both someone of her time and also kind of an interloper. No one really expects her to do anything remarkable. She is married off at the age of 13. She has her first child before she's 14 years old. She is put through terrible amounts of trauma with her first husband, King of Lot. Even though she's a queen and she lives in Orkney, she decides to hand over the crown of Orkney and the Isles to Arthur. This is in direct defiance of her husband's wishes, but the way that I made the rules in Orkney, the surviving spouse always has the ability to decide who is the next person, and Gawain certainly doesn't want it. This is a first-person narrative, so it's not always reliable, but all of the major events of that sort of part of Arthur between when Merlin is captured and when Mordred is born really happens during this period. It's also when we see the great peace achieved. So for the first time, there aren't wars every 5 minutes by the end of this book. In the middle of it, absolutely, Gawain has to go to war when he's about 15 or 16 years old, and you can imagine what that does to a person, hence being a total hothead and jerk. Boy needed a hug, he should have gone to therapy, but that didn't exist back then. But like I said, Anna is always an outsider. Even with her sisters, she's not their full sister. They have their own lives, their own talents, their own experiences. Very early on, her sister Elaine leaves to Gaul to get married to Ban of Benwick, and she doesn't. That's her only close sister is gone, and they never really reunite again. What happens is sort of a series of about 10 years of time between which Anna is able to infiltrate some of the most protected people in Carillon, which is what I call Camelot, and have her vengeance. I'm not going to give it away because there's a lot of magic and a lot of twists and turns, but readers have enjoyed it and definitely found that it's very empowering for those of us who are not just women, but also mothers and people who have had to experience othering in our lives because of who we are and being underestimated, because you should never underestimate us. Anyway, that book is Queen of None. It's the first in my trilogy, Queen of None, Queen of Fury, and Queen of Mercy, and it is available everywhere. The audiobook is also phenomenal. It is narrated by Deborah Baum, and she really absolutely embodies Anna to the last.